I weave through the trees, the ground soft and damp beneath my feet. I keep my eyes ahead, my gaze unwavering. It's night, and the moon shines slightly through the treetops, giving me just enough light to navigate. I'm not sure why I'm out here. Come to think of it, I realize that I'm not even sure how I got out here. It's as if I'm being drawn into the forest, some unseen force pulling me. My pulse quickens at the sudden realization, and I snap out of my dazed trance and stop dead in my tracks. I hug myself, shivering, and look around cautiously. Not a single sound throughout the forest can be heard. It is dead silent, and I'm suddenly overcome with a sense of unease. Something isn't right. It's too quiet. A twig snaps from somewhere behind me, and I whip around, staring off into the dark and straining to see anything more than 5 feet in front of me. A rustling of leaves off to my right. I jerk my head in that direction. Who's there? I call out, trying my best to sound intimidating. Suddenly, a scream rings out throughout the forest. Help! Somebody help me! That voice. I know that voice. Amara! I scream. I start running, searching desperately for my best friend. Amara, where are you? I call out, searching for a sign of movement amongst the trees. Another scream rings out, but this time, it seems to be coming from all around, and I can't pinpoint the direction. The sound is unnaturally intense, and a sharp pain shoots through both of my temples. My vision becomes blurry, and I drop to my knees, covering my ears. There is a ringing in my ears that lasts for a few moments before the sound stops just as suddenly as it came. My heart is racing. What the fuck is going on? I look up and I'm startled to see Amara standing in front of me. She looks down at me with a blank expression, saying nothing. Amara, are you okay? I ask. Her gaze moves from me to somewhere behind me. Her eyes widen with fear and the color drains from her face. He's here, she says, taking a step back. What? Who's here? I stand up and turn around. Between the trees, I see a faint outline of a person, tall and lanky, slowly moving towards us. Who are you? I call out, taking a step back in the process. The figure continues to move closer. Amara. I glance back at her, but her expression has become blank again. I reach out and shake her by the shoulders. Amara, what's going on? Who is that? I shake her a little harder, but it's no use. It's as if she's stuck in a sort of trance. I turn back around, and the figure is no more than 10 feet away now. It steps into a small patch of moonlight gleaming through the treetops. At first, it looks like a person. My blood runs cold at the sight. It's unnaturally tall, with limbs to match the height of its body. Its skin is pale, like a dead body. Where a face should be, there is none. Just a blank area where facial features should be. It continues to creep towards us, and I am completely frozen in fear. I see other shapes outside of my peripheral vision, black outlines that look like people. I look around, and to my horror, I realize that they are coming from all directions. I'm trapped. People from all sides surround me, their skin pale and their eyes expressionless. It's too late for me, Katie. Amara's voice is just above a whisper. Don't let them get you too, she says. The people are closing in, and there is nowhere for me to run. I scramble, turning this way and that, trying to find a way to escape. They all reach their arms out, continuing to surround me, closing in on me like a pack of wolves isolating a deer. Go into the forest. They all chant in unison, repeating it over and over. My eyes well up with tears, and I cover my ears. dropping to my knees again and closing my eyes shut. Even with my ears covered, there's no escape from their chanting. I jolt upright, panting and covered in sweat. At first I didn't know where I am, and it takes me a moment to realize I'm in my room. I sigh, running my fingers through my sweat-drenched hair, and try to catch my breath. It was just a dream, I say to myself. Just a dream. The very same dream that's been plaguing me for the past 2 weeks since my friend went missing on a camping trip. I lay back and close my eyes, trying to calm myself. I begin to relax, turning onto my side. I've almost fallen back asleep when I feel a cool breeze against my still damp skin. I open my eyes for a second and I look at my bedroom window. It's open, and I don't recall leaving it like that before I went to bed. You probably did leave it open and just forgot to close it before you went to bed, I reason with myself and shrug it off, closing my eyes and giving way to sleep once more. A man holding an apple gazed at the swirling pink and orange sky. In the seclusion of the isolated prairie, a gentle morning breeze lapped his skin and rustled the tall grass, and the man unhinged his jaw and mauled the red apple with his gleaming incisors, tearing its tangy, juicy flesh. The prairie itself, while grassy, was covered in a bizarre amount of holes, which he spent time tripping over before he reached his spot. Underneath him, there was what felt like a small, undisturbing tremor deep in the earth, but he paid no mind. This was self-inflicted paradise. Loneliness is stigmatized, but those who decry it don't understand its peace and its healing power like the man here does. And so he enjoyed his break from reality, just a man and nature, as it should be. The man could see a dark line of trees on the edge of the prairie, where his camp laid, so far away. Black-winged birds flew above the woods, but they didn't near the grassland, and yet he could hear their cries. It was strange, the man thought. There appeared to be no fauna on the prairie. Not one insect buzzed by his head. Again, the earth tremored, but much harder. It rolled like a mouse under a rug, and the man was sent sprawling. His clothes were smeared in dirt. Suddenly, the forest looked a lot more appealing, and the man trekked towards the trees, stepping and stumbling in an absurd amount of holes in the dirt, so far away. Out of the corner of his eye, a shadow darted through the tall grass. What was it? Was it spying on him? The man crashed towards the shadow like a madman, but it was gone. The man was nearly halfway to the trees when a small, furry mammal hopped with its gift of bipedalism right in front of his path. Through the whipping blades, the man saw the prairie dog, standing on its hind legs, and it opened its mouth, revealing devilish teeth, and it barked. The ground seemed to suck in, and it groaned, and the two beings stood there in the prairie, in silhouette with the sky a swirl of orange and pink. The earth lurched and snapped like a jaguar's coiled haunches, finally releasing an explosive kinetic energy to kill its helpless prey. Out of the countless holes poured forth 300,000 demonic rodents, gnashing their teeth and barking like hellhounds. The man broke into a sprint, arms and legs moving in perfect unison. But the prairie devils rose from the ground, far in front of him, like hatching bees from a honeycomb, blocking the safety of the forest. The rodents climbed upon his legs, digging in their claws and their gleaming teeth. The man kicked and swatted off as many as he could, and he stomped their bodies into the dirt with a crunch until they were a bloody pulp of fur and bone. They kept coming, like flies to a rotting corpse. The prairie dogs bit and clawed out chunks of flesh from everywhere on his body, going for the soft parts first. Limping, the bedraggled, blinded, infertile man somehow willed his way to the tree line, and the piranhas jumped ship and stared at him from the grassy ocean. The man had collapsed, but with a yell of defiance, he dragged his tortured, wounded body towards where he believed the camp was, over the cool forest grass. The prairie dogs watched him disappear into the woods and licked the blood from their fur. The struggle was insane, and the man, not even sure if he was going in the right direction, never lost hope. He wasn't going to break down and cry. It hadn't crossed his mind. This was survival. It unlocks the true primal worth of a man that society has tried to keep hidden for millennia. However, the vultures cried for him. They descended like a tornado from the heavens to claim their prize. And the man got beaked to death in agony, hearing the ghoulish calls of gargoyle vultures ringing in his ears to the afterlife. My limbs spasm and rack with pain as every cell in my body screams for oxygen. My lungs ache, my muscles burn. The lens of my scuba mask has cracked, allowing in just enough brackish water to burn my eyes and sting my sinuses. Through the stars that have started to crowd my sight, I can see the glow around me intensify. I can hear him, somehow, through the depths. I can even smell him. He calls to me, Sizzin, the stinking one. I hear his voice draw nearer, whispers in Yucatec of the horrors that await me. I feel his skeletal hand wrap around my ankle, squeezing into my flesh, pulling me to him, pulling me into Zabalba, the place of fear. But my fear is gone. As my vision starts to dim, tranquility overcomes me. There's a strange comfort in the warm, liquid embrace of the water. Calm seeps into me. It engulfs me, soothes my terror, and stops my struggle. It is the calm that allows my mind to accept that the darkness of death comes. I've always had a fear of the water. Since my earliest recollection, bodies of water any larger than the toilet bowl brought me unease. A near-drowning experience in my early adolescence turned that fear into a full-blown phobia. Here it was, my 45th birthday, and my distaste for water was no weaker. I found myself in the Yucatan, visiting my maternal grandmother, and staring at something that made my skin crawl. Well-meaning family members, knowing my fear, had given me the gift of scuba lessons. As I stared at the certificate, I vaguely heard the platitudes they spoke. Face your demons, a life lived in fear, and all that. But that was exactly how I had lived my life. Afraid. The thought of diving deep into water horrified me. A warm, wrinkled hand touched my shoulder and pulled me out of my quiet contemplation. "Je page tala pitik pal," my grandmother says as she smiles. Yucatec, for you can do it, my son. My grandmother, descended from the Maya, was such a warrior as any man I had ever known. Her dark and powerful eyes filled me with a confidence I didn't think I could summon. That night, as I lay in bed, shivering and drenched in sweat, after another water-based nightmare, I decided enough was enough. Maybe they weren't just platitudes. Maybe my grandmother was right. I could, and I would. The lessons progressed slowly, mostly because each lesson started with me taking 20 minutes of the hour trying to psych myself up for the plunge. But in time, that changed. I soon found that having the ability to see and breathe underwater calmed that anxiety. It gave me power, gave me dominion over the depths. I took my fear, shrunk it down, and stomped on it. Soon, I spent every spare moment in the practice pool. Started doing short dives by the reefs off the coast of Campeche, Mexico. By the time my certification was complete, I was a diving junkie. Then, my 46th birthday came. My family, proud of the progress I had made and wanting to support this newfound fearlessness, gifted me with my first cave diving excursion. The dive would take me to one of the many cenotes in our area, the limestone sinkholes that descended into the earth, filled by the high water table and connected by underground rivers and sometimes the sea itself. It was the diving junkie's mecca, an experience few divers got to undertake. Again, a familiar feeling of dread started to percolate in my gut. This time, as I quietly held the certificate in my hand, I again felt the warm, wrinkled hand on my shoulder. But when I smiled and looked up at her, her dark eyes were filled with fear. Her hand visibly trembled as she took it off my shoulder. She looked around cautiously, as if worried someone would overhear her. Her voice, low and conspiratorial, she simply said, "Leila ukas ma amintik pala antenne." Our interaction was interrupted by my uncle, who patted my back harder than he needed to, probably owed to the half a bottle of cachaca that he had taken down over the prior hour. By the time I was done sitting him down and getting him a glass of water, I saw my grandmother had slipped away. She was quietly absent the rest of the night. My Yucatec is not great. I picked out the words, "This is wrong," in what she had said, but everything else was lost to whatever damage the early 1990s had done to my brain. Language notwithstanding, she was warning me. Of what? I couldn't tell. The adventure was the following day, and as I lay in bed, sleep escaped me. But it wasn't a sense of excitement. It was a fearful anticipation. I chalked the unease up to the strangeness with my grandmother, and eventually fell asleep. I awoke with a start. A strange smell filled my nostrils. I sat up and retched as it overwhelmed me. It smelled of sulfur and decay, made my eyes water and my throat burn. I looked around, struggling to make sense of it, and searching for a source of the stench. Then I heard it, the sound of whispering voices. It wasn't a single voice, but it sounded like a quiet chorus, a symphony of otherworldly tongues. I heard the speech, but none of it made sense to my exhausted mind. Then, from an unnaturally darkened corner of my room, I saw movement in the shadows. A skeletal hand reached towards me, finger pointed, the polished bone lit by a solitary beam of moonlight. The rest of it slowly slid into the light. A skeleton with a glowing cloud of smoke surrounding it and emanating from it. The smoke wafted toward me and carried with it that stench from before. Around its neck was a collar, a fleshy necklace that glistened with wetness. Eyeballs, dozens of them, threaded into some sort of macabre jewelry. The eyes hanging against its collarbone, dangling by their optic nerves. Its jaw opened, and the voices around me grew louder, angrier. The chorus was confusing, at once sounding like voices, and the next moment, like rushing waters. It was Yucatec, but the only words I could pick out were waiting and you. A memory emerged, popping up from deep in the recesses of my childhood. An image of a dancing skeleton, its neck adorned with a string of eyeballs. It was Cizan, the Mayan god of the underworld, as if it could sense my recollection. The watery vocals grew louder and louder until I could feel them like a breeze against my skin. Instinctively, I closed my eyes and covered my ears as the voices flowed over me like a hot, angry wind. Then I felt its hand close around my leg. I awoke with a scream, this time for real, out of breath and panicked, pillow and sheets soaked with sweat, after the most vivid nightmare I've ever had. As I got out of bed and changed my bedding, a whiff of something foul entered my nose yet again. Hours later, I sat, scuba gear on, legs dangling off a small platform built against the wall of the cenote. These had once been sacred places to my grandmother's people, to my people. Portals to the underworld, the land of Sizun, their god of death. They had once been places only visited by holy men and those that were to be sacrificed in the pursuit of the god's blessings. Now, a prime diving spot for tourists. It felt wrong, like our presence was a defilement, a sacrilege against the beliefs of my ancestors. My dive coach rattled off a long list of cautions and advice for my first cave dive, but I only half heard him. My mind replayed the chorus of voices as a familiar dread crept into my soul. After descending into the depths of the cenote, we follow the water flow down and into the subterranean river that feeds and connects all the cenotes in the area. As I follow the guideline, I see the fins of my dive lead ahead of me. The water is still and clear, but the weight of the cave ceiling above me pushes down on me in a way that I can't even describe. I look at my dive watch, and though it seems an eternity, I've only been at depth for 11 minutes. I'm using every tool in my arsenal to keep myself calm, to keep my breathing regulated. Off of the main cavern extends countless offshoots, smaller water-filled passages that extend deeper into the unknown depths of the Yucatan. As I continue to follow the guideline laid out for us, I fail to notice that the cave narrows to only a couple meters high, and I feel the jarring scrape of rocks against my tank, a panic-induced reminder that there is no up for me. A few more minutes of mindless swimming with the slow current, and I realize that I no longer see the fins in front of me. My dive lead is nowhere to be seen. My hand grasps the dive line as I pause to take stock. I scan the surrounding area with my light, its beam cutting a swath through the depths. I feel a small vibration in my hand and notice the light flicker just a bit. It briefly brightens, then cuts out completely. It falls to my wrist as I'm plunged into darkness, and both hands instinctively go to the guideline. I began to mentally take stock. I had sufficient air and a guideline that allowed me to get back to the surface. The light was not a necessity. Stay calm. Breathe normally. Don't panic. I hear the voice in my head saying it, but I can also feel each breath getting shallower and closer together. The back of my neck tightens as the panic begins to take hold. I reach into my waist pouch to find the emergency chem lights that we packed. Light will help. If I can see, I'm okay. My fingers fumble, and I feel them slip from my grasp. Instinctively, I release the guideline with my other hand in a failed attempt to catch them. This only serves to now leave me blind and untethered. The panic rises and threatens to choke me. I move my head up quickly, trying to find the lost guideline. And instead, I'm greeted by a low ceiling that cracks my mask and my head, knocking my regulator loose. Stop! I scream at myself in my own head. Just stop. Calm down. Remember the training. Trust the gear. Stay put. As I forced my breathing slower, I notice a dim yellow light shining to my right. A a small passage that leads off into the unknown, and in the distance, it glows softly. There is no light source, just an ambient brightness to the passageway. In the light, I see movement. In my heart, I know it isn't my dive lead. It is him. I can feel him approaching. The movement takes shape. That familiar skeletal figure with the twisted necklace of eyes. He glides smoothly through the water, his bony fingers outstretched towards me. Then I hear a chorus of voices begin. Only this time, I understand everything. Above the pounding of my heart and rasping of my breath, I hear his voice. I told you I would be waiting for you. Panic wells up in me until I feel nothing else. I swim as fast and hard as I can. But the movement becomes hard. My muscles stop responding. I breathe, but it tastes stale. My air is gone. My power, my dominion over the depths was just an illusion. Cizin has come to take his dominion back. I can't swim anymore. My oxygen-starved body has betrayed me. As he pulls me by the ankle back toward him, I no longer struggle. I let the water trap me in a fluid burial shroud. I can hear what is in store for me, but my soul is unconcerned. The useless regulator falls from my mouth and a gurgle out into the void. Tannen Soasik, I am ready. Then, darkness. I awake to pain, a searing hot flash of pain as my heart is shocked back into rhythm. I roll over and retched out a stomach and lungs full of water. My eyes open briefly to see the light of day and my dive coach and others hovering over me. I offer a weak smile and promptly fade into unconsciousness. I'm on my 3rd day in the hospital now. Doctors and my family, having heard my tale, dismiss it as they would a fever dream. Visions born of hypoxia, my primary doctor has said. I am told that the blow to the rear of my tank caused damage to my gear. Everything after that was a result of my brain slowly being strangled, the intensity of the visions increasing with each minute of oxygen deprivation. My dive lead noticed my absence, returned to find me floating limply in a side passage, and dragged me back to the cenote where vigorous chest compressions and an AED brought me back. But I know the truth. I'm to be released tomorrow, or so I'm told. My injuries are severe, but will heal in time. A concussion from striking my head, a broken rib, and several more cracked ones from the resuscitation efforts. And deep, finger-shaped bruises around my left ankle. They have no explanation for these. As I lay here, trying to sleep, an odor wafts in from my window. I hear a familiar chorus of voices quietly calling out to me. Lili Tan and Patek. I'm still waiting,